Welcome. In this video, we're going to be doing a review of the process for customizing printouts in Function Point. We're going to be focusing on invoices in this example. I'm going to start by pulling up a few invoices that I've created already. If I select Print from the Invoice Details page, it'll produce a client-facing PDF. This will have your logo as opposed to ours at the top left. This is the default invoice in the system. We're seeing the service group, its description, each individual service, and a value at the service level. The other example is a single invoice with multiple jobs. Again, selecting Print will produce our client-facing PDF. Here we can see each job, its description, and a value at the job level. And again, this will have your logo at the top left as opposed to ours. Let's go ahead and customize those printouts. We'll start by going into the Admin section, under System Setup, and Printing Preferences. Here we can choose to customize printouts and also brand templates. Brand templates are essentially the background of the printouts. I'm going to show two examples today. The first is going to be a single-page brand template. It has a logo at the top and some graphics at the bottom. This is going to be the background of, in this case, our invoice. The second example I'm going to show is a multi-page PDF, where the second page is an example of, in this case, contract terms. The first page is again showing our logo and graphics at the bottom, and the second page is an example of what it might be like to have contract terms or other details you might want to show up on other pages of, in this case, an invoice. We're going to start by selecting to add a brand template. Give it a name. I'm going to call this single page brand template. Choose my file. Click Save. And this will bring us to the area where we can customize the layout of that brand template. Notice that the PDF is displayed. This is where we can then drag and drop the margins to define where on the page the content will appear. We'll want to avoid the graphics that we have. And in the bottom right, the little green square is where the page number will show up. I'm going to put that in line with the content. Make any adjustments that we'd like here. Click Approve and Publish, and our brand template is then created. Let's go ahead and add the other one. I'm going to again select to Add Brand Template. We'll call this Contract Terms Brand Template. Choose our file. Click Save. This is going to bring us to the same page, but we'll see a slight difference. Notice at the top right, we have Content Start Page and Content End Page. This is allowing us to select where we want the content of, in our example today, an invoice, to show up on the document. In this case, we have contract terms on page 2. Therefore, we want the content to start on page 1 and the content to end on page 1. We don't want any content overlapping our terms and conditions. Another example of this might be, say, an estimate. But perhaps on page 1, you want an overview of the agency, and on page 2, you want the estimate itself. In that case, your brand template would have content on page 1, and page 2 would be blank, or perhaps with a letterhead. You would then choose to have content start on page 2 and end on page 2, or page 3 if it happens to be longer. You may want to add in more detail. Perhaps page 1 is an overview of the agency, page 2 is a case study, and page 3 is the estimate. In that case, you would create your brand template to provide that detail and choose for the content to start and end on page 3. Again, we'll adjust our margins. Perhaps adjust where the page number is displaying. Select Approve and Publish. We've now created two brand templates. Next, we're going to choose to customize the printouts. We'll go into My Printouts and select to add a printout. I'm going to call this one Simple Invoice. Select our printout type. In this case, it is a Invoice single printout. Click Save and Next, and that brings us to the page where we can customize the content of the invoice. What we're able to do is go through each section and choose what level of detail we want to be displayed. It also affords us the opportunity to adjust some of the terminology. The header, for example, we already have a logo showing in our brand template. Therefore, I don't want the default system logo to be showing here. We can also scroll right and see from a variety of different layout options. We'll go through and adjust the details. The Invoice Details section is where we can choose what level of detail is showing in the scope of work area. Again, we can adjust some of the terminology. And then in this example, I'm going to decide to show the service group name, description, and total. But I don't want the services themselves or the expenses to show. We also have the option of including some reports. The expanded summary report is essentially the financials tab in a PDF. It's showing us estimated actual and invoice values with variances and quantities. The status report is a line-by-line report of all time and expenses entered against the job up until the time of the invoice. These are handy if you have a client that is requesting a large amount of detail to be accompanied with their invoices. Having the system automatically produce these reports along with the invoice means that you don't have to go and produce them yourself separately. In this example, I'm going to deselect these reports. We'll say that we don't need them and we just want a simple invoice. From here, we'll select to approve and publish, and our invoice is now created. Let's go ahead and add the other with the contract terms. I'm going to call this Detailed Invoice. Select our Invoice Single, choose our brand template, which I may not have done on the other example, and we'll jump back there in a second. Click Save and Next. And then just like before, we're then going through and selecting the level of detail we want showing. Again, in our header, we'll choose to deselect the logo, go into the details. In this example, we'll say that perhaps we want these services showing, but just their names. I don't want the descriptions or the totals. Same with expenses. We'll have the total of the service group, but the services themselves will still be displayed. I'm going to take off the reports again. Select Approve and Publish, and that is our detailed invoice created. Notice that in the first example, I actually forgot to select the brand template, and therefore that field is blank. So I'm going to choose to edit this. Notice that there's an area that says Show Details at the top right. Here's where I can choose my brand template. Choose that single page brand template. Again, hit Approve and Publish, and our printout is now created. Let's go to the Invoice Details page for the first invoice we looked at. What we'll see is the button that says Print now provides a few different options. If we look at our simple invoice, we'll find an invoice on the brand template. Notice the logo and the graphics at the bottom. Notice that we're showing the service group, its description, and value at the service group. Whereas the other option, the detailed invoice, is showing us more detail, including each individual service, but a total still at the service group level based on what we created in the admin section under printing preferences. And notice that page 2 is our terms and conditions. Let's take a look now at customizing the multi-job single invoice. The process is exactly the same. We'll go into Printing Preferences, select My Printouts, and select to add a printout. In this case, we're going to call this Simple Multi-Job Invoice. Select our type, I'm going to choose Invoice Batch, but I'm not going to choose Expanded. The difference is that Batch allows you to have multiple jobs in a single invoice. Expanded allows you to show the services and the service groups for each job all in the same invoice. We'll look at both examples. Select the batch, choose our brand template, and choose our contract terms. Click Save and Next. And just like before, I'm going through and selecting the content that I want to show or not show on my invoice. We'll say in this case, we want all the detail, including the job description and total. Well, just like before, I'm going to take off the reports for this example. Click Approve and Publish. We've now added the simple multi-job invoice. Let's add the very last one here. We'll call this Detailed Multi-Job Invoice. Select our type. I'm going to choose the Batch Expanded. Select our brand template. Choose the single page in this case. Click Save and Next. We'll deselect our logo again. In the details, as opposed to the invoice batch non-expanded, we now have the option of including the service groups and the services. We'll say we want the service groups, perhaps not the services and expenses. Deselect our reports. Click Approve and Publish. We've now created our invoices. If we go back to the batch invoice and select to print, notice the two different options. We'll look at the simple. This is going to be each job in its description, a total of the job level, with the second page being contract terms. The other example is going to show an expanded version with the service group beneath each job, its description, and total. Notice that we're getting subtotals for each job. And in this case, we just have the letterhead repeating itself. There are no contract terms. Those are the different ways that you can customize the printouts. We recommend playing around with that and finding the level of detail and type of terminology that you like. Please continue checking out more of our videos for more helpful information on using Function Point.